We are here with Lorne Weil, who is the executive chairman of Inspired Entertainment, a company that's been around a while, but it's still an emerging company, I think we can say. And it's really quite a diverse company, given its size, and becoming more diverse all the time. Lorne, can you give us a little overview on Inspired and maybe how you see it developing over the next year or so?
Yeah, well, I think, Frank, it's not as diverse or as complicated as it might look. Some time ago, my former company, Scientific Games, I guess now Light and Wonder.
Right.
Yeah, just as an aside, it was nice of them to pick a name that used my initials. But they began describing themselves as a cross-platform games company. The sale of their lottery business kind of eliminated one important of those cross-platforms, but I still think cross-platform game company is quite an elegant way to describe them. And I guess to paraphrase Oscar Wilde, that plagiarism is the highest form of flattery. I would plagiarize their description and describe us in exactly the same way as a cross-platform game company. So essentially what we're mostly about now is developing games, and then we distribute them through a number of different platforms.
Well, one of the reasons I enjoy talking to you, Lorne, every year is you will always come up with like a literary reference to, something like Oscar Wilde. In your last conference call, and you're a pretty measured fella in what you say, and yet in your last conference call you said something which I thought was really a bold statement when you talked about the enormous opportunities ahead, which is followed by your previous conference call where you talked about the extraordinary opportunity the stock market has given you to repurchase shares.
Right.
Even though that's not on the top of your list in terms of capital allocation. Can you talk to us a little bit about what those opportunities are and how big they might be for Inspired?
Sure. Let me first say, though, I'm going to have to be careful about what I say in conference calls from now on. Think ahead to our next G2E interview, but I guess probably the two biggest would be virtual sports and all of the opportunities we see now in lottery, which really is just one more place to sell our games. In Europe, where virtual sports is maturing very nicely and has been performing actually the last couple of years miraculously, in those markets where virtuals have had a chance to develop, they typically become 10 or 15% of the total sports betting market. So, for example, if Italy is a $10 billion sports betting market, then virtual sports would be a $1 billion market, which is actually, those are roughly the numbers in Italy. So I think if we project ahead at what people talk about as the ultimate size of sports betting in North America, once a majority of the states have it, people talk about 30, 40, $50 billion of sports betting. And I'm pretty comfortable that we can anticipate that 10% of that would be virtuals. So a $5 billion virtual market for us is, I think that warrants the description of an extraordinary opportunity. Similarly, the lottery industry in the United States is now getting close to $100 billion, and it's about $300 billion worldwide. And I think a huge portion of that is in the process of going digital. We have a tremendous library of games from our iGaming area. we're already seeing a tremendous interest and adoption of virtual sports in the lottery vertical. And so I think that is another, very, very, very big opportunity that we're pursuing very vigorously.
And one of the things that we see when we look at surveys such as the Eilers-Fantini survey is that the top titles in virtual sports are inspired, 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 inspired.
Right.
So it's your segment of the industry.
Pretty much, yeah. We have, I'm not sure what our exact market share is, but it's quite large. Largely because we've invested by far more than probably everybody else put together in developing technology and content for it. We have by far the broadest array of sports. Some of our customers, online customers, will have 15 or 20 channels of our virtual sports, each channel for a different sport. We're very focused, obviously, on customer service. And so it's not surprising that when you go on these sites, most of them are our games because we have the best games.
You made a pass at acquiring AGS here recently.
I didn't know that, really?
Yeah. It was in all the papers.
I must have missed that paper, but anyway.
Well, they don't have papers anymore.
Yeah, that's true, yeah.
So what does that say about how you look at, and they're a slot machine, class 2, class 3, and they're an ETG company.
Yeah.
What does that say about your plans for how you're shaping Inspired for the future?
Yeah, well, the industry is clearly undergoing a process of consolidation, and it's been consolidating steadily almost since I first became involved in it, 40 years ago. And I think from my career, I've always been a consolidator and have never had any interest in being a consolidatee. So if we're in a consolidation process, then I think clearly we are going to be aggressive in participating in that activity. We've reached a point, and clearly we're not big, but at 100 million of EBITDA, we've got the wherewithal to do transactions that are interesting to us. Although I've always been a consolidator, I've never been a big believer in out and out, unrelated, non-strategic diversification just to get bigger for the sake of getting bigger. So we have a very carefully designed template that we use and will be using to look at acquisition possibilities. But I'd say, given now the strength of our balance sheet and the strength of our cash flow, that we're going to be looking to consolidate things with us that make sense.
Very good. And along those lines, excuse me, you do have, as you say, a good balance sheet. Your cash, you have cash flow. You mentioned stock repurchases some time ago. You've mentioned consolidation now. What are those priorities today for deployment of capital?
So at the very top of the priority list is and always needs to be funding the growth and development of our existing business. Because as soon as we stop doing that, then we're compromising the integrity of what brought us here in the first place. So number one is making sure we're doing everything we can to allow our businesses to be as strong as they possibly can. As our business has swung strongly digital, so if you go back to when we first got involved with Inspired 5 years ago, the EBITDA at the time was 25 million, and the digital business was about 15% of that. Now in that 5-year period, we quadrupled the EBITDA to 100 million, but the digital part is 50% of that. So it's been a phenomenal growth in the digital part, and the digital part has as its virtues that it has a considerably higher margin than the core business, and maybe more importantly, much, much, much less capital intensive. So as our EBITDA grows and the growth comes in the digital part, the cash flow gets better and better. And paradoxically, it's easier and easier to fund the growth because the growth is coming in those parts of the business that are less capital intensive. It sounds complicated, but actually it's quite simple. So what that means is after funding the growth of our business, which we're never going to compromise, there's plenty of cash left over. So we've been, for the last few months, buying our stock back, and we're continuing to execute on that plan. Strangely, the devaluation of the pound against the dollar, while it's not great for our earnings, is actually terrific for our balance sheet. And the nominal value of our debt has declined by about $50 million because of in dollars because of the drop in the pound. So now we're beginning to think maybe about retiring some of our debt in advance of its maturity. And then I think then acquisitions.
Okay, it's a great story. I'm one of those people who thinks your price of your stock is super
Well,
bargain
I have my order sheet with me if you
well,
want to.
when we're done here, I've got
Yeah,
a pen,
because
so-
I might be able to get you into the employee stock purchase plan and you get a discount.
Wow, that would be even better.
Uh-huh.
So tell us, so you don't have to tell me, but tell the folks out there the investment thesis.
Well, I think the investment thesis is the thesis that is based on what I said a minute ago. In the last 5 years or so, our mix of business has swung dramatically from so-called retail to digital. Yet at the same time, the profits of the company itself have quadrupled. So we've quadrupled the total, and yet the percentage of it that was digital went from about 15% to, let's say, 50%. So that algebra would say the digital part has gone up 10 or 15 times in the last 5 years. And as that happens, we become proportionately more profitable because the digital businesses have higher margins. We're using less capital because the digital businesses are less capital intensive. And so the whole composition of the company financially has profoundly changed and will continue to profoundly change as we go forward.
Great. We're at G2E. People want to see the newest and the best. What are the one or two must-sees at your booth this year?
Okay, so back when I was at Scientific Games, we became very proficient at using licensed brands applied to products that we had. And we weren't really able to do that until we had reached a level of profitability where we had enough money to afford to acquire these brands. So we're just getting to that point now in Inspired, and we've got a couple of very exciting things to see in the booth. One is we have a virtual sports home run derby game that features many of the greatest all-time baseball players because we have a license deal with the Major League Baseball Alumni Association. So you can see a home run derby of Babe Ruth playing against Mickey Mantle. Then we have a deal with the NFL Alumni Players Association, and we have a football game where you can see the two quarterbacks are, Brett Favre and, Fran Tarkenton. And then finally, this year we licensed, you remember the old game Space Invaders, and we've done that both on a video gaming machine, which is a really fabulous game and people love it, and it's become an incredible online title in the iGaming business. So I'd say the Major League Baseball game, the NFL football game, and the Space Invaders games are the things to see.
Very good. Great overview, Lorne. Anything else you'd like to say about Inspired?
No, I think you covered it extremely well. And if there's anything we forgot to talk about, I would suggest that the listeners look at the previous interviews we've done, because between this and the last 4 or 5, I think you probably get the whole story.
Very good. Well, I just want you to know I'm inspired.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Lorne.
Yeah.